I'm happy to be with you. I have nothing but respect for all of you. As you know, you run this state very, very well. I just wish we in the federal government could do as well. It's pathetic what really is happening back there. So you're an example to us, and I pay attention to it. Let me just mention one thing, because I know it's on everybody's mind, and then I'd be happy to take any questions you'd care to ask. I mentioned over in the House sequestration. I believe we're going to go into sequestration. As you can see, there hasn't been anything really done to avoid it back in Washington. Now, if we go into sequestration, that's going to be a very, very sorry chapter in this country's life. And it means every military installation in this country is going to face some very drastic changes for at least a short period of time, including Hill Air Force Base and some of our other military installations in this state. They're talking about furloughs and a whole raft of other things, and it could be a very, very tough time to go through. One of the reasons Republicans are so dead set, they would love to solve this. They would love to have an approach to solving it. But they're dead set to go through it with it because they don't believe that we can get any real spending reductions without it. The president insisting on, now that he got the tax increase that he actually wanted, although it was only the upper 1%, not the 2% he was asking for, Republicans have got some interesting things out of that, because for the first time in decades, and I'll preface it this way, in 2001, 2003, on those tax cuts, we controlled the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and we could not get permanency on the tax cuts. In this case, we did, for those 99% of the American people. And I think Senator McConnell said it very straightforwardly when he said the tax debate is over. Now it comes down to spending. And the reason Republicans don't want to go into a spending or taxing approach anymore is because we've got to get spending under control. And we know that if we raise taxes, they'll just spend it. And it isn't just Democrats will spend it, it'll be some Republicans as well. So I suspect we're going to go through some trying times. The question is, how long will the sequester last? Nobody knows. It'll be very difficult to resolve it. And as you can see, the president was making it quite clear that this must all be the Republicans' fault. And yet he's unwilling to do anything about this $16.5 trillion national debt, almost 16.6 now, that's headed to $20 trillion before the end of his 4 years, and probably higher than that. And we just can't keep spending like we're doing. So Republicans are pretty dead set against what the president wants. There are some Democrats in the House who are, but not any in the Senate that I can see. We're going to go through some trying times. And I know that this body will do everything in its power to make sure Utah is on a solid fiscal footing. Having said that dreadful news, let me turn the time over to you for any questions you might want to ask on anything.
Thank you, Senator Hatch. Questions? Senator Maine.
Thank you very much. I don't have a question for you, but every time we see each other, I think we go back 5.5 years.
We do.
And I would just thank you for the love and kindness that you showed my family in a trying situation. It's nice to see you, Senator.
Well, thank you, Karen. Your husband was one of my dear friends. And even though we differed on a lot of things, he was always very gracious and kind to me. And let me tell you, you're doing a good job, too. And I just want you to know that we miss him. He was a great asset to this state in many, many ways. And even if you disagreed with him, he was always a gentleman. He always handled himself very, very well. But God bless you and your family.
Senator Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, it's good to see you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
My question is related to the federal budget and the reality that the Senate has not passed a budget, I think, now in 4 years. Just wondered if you could comment on that and see if you see any hope, any change in that reality as we move forward.
No, I don't. In fact, we're going into the 5th year of trillion-dollar deficits. And I don't see any real effort to try and change that. The president says, well, if we get more taxes, we can change that. Well, they spend every dime of it, every time. And that's what the problem is. We know we've got to cut back. You know, when Mitt was talking about the 47%, he was wrong. It's actually 51%. Now, in that 51% are a lot of good people. Retired veterans, disabled people, elderly, and so forth. But we have an ever-increasing number of people who can work but can't get jobs, or won't work if the jobs aren't what they want. And we've got to somehow get to the point where, and it's actually 51%, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. I'm a member of that committee, among others. And I have to say, we can't keep going to where the incentives are to not work. A lot of people compare it to a wagon where too many people are in the wagon. We need to get better jobs, better opportunities, better economy, so they can get out of the wagon and help pull the wagon. And look, we're in trouble in this country. Medicare, we can solve that problem. We can solve Medicaid. We can solve Social Security in a nanosecond if we could just get together back there. We know that we're going to have to extend the age on Social Security. We know that we're going to have to go to a better CPI that is much more economically sound, like chain CPI. The president is amenable to that, he says. But my friends on the other side are not. And some Republicans aren't. We know that Medicare is around $40 trillion in unfunded liability, but we can solve that problem if we do it now. Medicaid's almost that bad and getting worse, and you're going to see it as we move into the so-called Affordable Care Act completely. This year and next year are going to be crunching years for us. And people don't realize how expensive that bill is really going to be. And it's not going to do what they say it should do. It was a valiant attempt, maybe, to try and get more people some sort of health care. But we need to provide a health care system where the incentives are to not overutilize the system. Right now, the incentives are all towards overutilizing the system. I even heard this morning that one of the young University of Utah students is really mad because he said all the kids on welfare get free cell phones. Well, you know, we've got to start waking up to these type of problems. And we've got to solve Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security now for our future generations, but also for those who are on Medicare and Medicaid. That just doesn't include the poor. It includes those who are disabled. It includes a number of other people as well. Medicare is a critical program to our senior citizens in particular. And we've got to resolve those. We need to do it now. The longer we wait and the more deeply we go into debt, the more difficult it's going to be to make the transitional changes that will have to be made.
Senator Jenkins and then Senator Valentine.
So, Senator, you mentioned sequestration, and I'd like you to drill down on that a little bit. In our committee this morning, we were going over what it was going to cost the state if we entered into sequestration, and it wasn't that much. I was surprised. I thought it would be considerably more. So why do you represent this as almost dangerous if we go over? It appears to me like this might very well be the best thing we could do.
Well, look, I'm in agreement with that. I don't think we can continue doing what we're doing. And sequestration may be the only way we can get things under control. But let me tell you some of the things I'm concerned about. I just did some analysis of the consequences of sequestration to Hill Air Force Base. And this is just a snapshot of some of the consequences to Utah that could occur at Hill. You know, you're talking about the effects on the private sector. Defense contractors like L3, Raytheon, Alliance Tech Systems, ITT Corporation, and countless other smaller firms. You know, I've got to say that it could be devastating to our nation's readiness. Now, I'm for sequestration, so please don't misconstrue that. I just want you to be aware it isn't a simple little matter. Hill is made up of over 63% civilian employees. It's the largest employer in our state, in my opinion. Up to 11,100 civilian employees are going to be furloughed. Probably, it depends on how long it goes, for 22 days, beginning as early as April 1st this year. Now, military personnel are exempt from sequestration under law, but the approximate loss in pay by all furloughed Utah civilian employees is going to be around $86.3 million, or the equivalent of the loss of a little over $7,700 loss in pay to each employee. The average civilian salary at Hill is $67,500. And, making a $7,700 loss plus loss in pay is going to be very, it comes to 11.5% cut in each civilian's annual salary if we go very long on sequestration. But where I find even worse problems is that with sequestration, weapons system sustainment at Hill can be drastically affected and be reduced by 18%. Now, what does that include? Affecting C-17, A-10, F-18, E-8, J-STARS, maintenance workload, it's going to affect that. It'll have a substantial effect on all the workload at Hill. And, from a military construction, MILCON standpoint of cuts to Hill Air Force Base that we had planned on doing, that'll come to about $13.5 million. Deferred projects will be about $1.7 million. And the U.S. Army Utah sequestration will amount to about $73 million in economic loss. It's about 1,557 jobs that will be affected, and about 1,253 civilians will be furloughed at a loss of $8 million in pay. So, I'm just giving you some of the problems. So it's not as simple as people might think, but I'll tell you something, it's going to be a lot worse if we don't do something about it now. In other words, if we don't face the music, that, I could go on that, but I think that's probably enough dreadful news under the circumstances. But if we don't do something about spending in this country, the greatest country in the world is going to have a lot of difficulties, a lot more than we've known in the past. And I don't see the desire on the part of the president. He's trying to blame Republicans for all this. Well, we don't want these $1 trillion+ deficits either. And it'll be 5 straight years, and I imagine it'll go right through the next 4 years.
Senator Valentine, and then we'll take one last question from Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Hatch, it's good to have you here.
Nice to be with you.
Obviously, you can tell a lot of us are concerned about not only sequestration, but about the federal government's lack of discipline. And candidly, most of us are now feeling like we'd rather have sequestration now than the future problems of not having the kind of restraint that the federal government should be exercising. So you heard my colleague, and I think he's accurately reflecting what many of us feel. It's not just social programs. We are going to have to make cuts all the way across the board.
Yep.
And candidly, Senator, we're prepared to do that from our side. And the monies that would be coming directly to the state, we're prepared to do that. And we're preparing now to take into account what's going to happen to the economy with less defensive spending in Utah. Now, my question now, knowing that as a backdrop, is this. Do you anticipate any further BRAC-type analysis where there could be facing a closure of Hill Air Force Base?
Well, I don't think the military knows that the 3 bases, Warner Robins, Tinker, and Hill, are critical to the readiness of the Air Force and a whole raft of others. Hill is particularly critical because we have the best software facility in all of the military and really in all the world. There are a few others that could equal us, but it's pretty hard to equal that. And you're right. I'm for sequestration. If we can't get some reasonable restraint of growth in spending, and if we can't do something about these programs that are really running out of control, that won't be there for our seniors in the future, won't be there for our handicapped people, won't be there for persons with disabilities, won't be there for many of our wounded warriors and so forth, won't be there for the truly poor. If we don't make these decisions now, it's going to be even 10 times more difficult in the future, and maybe 1,000 times more difficult as we go along. Now, Simpson and Bowles have come up with another budget, and that includes some hefty tax increases. Republicans aren't very excited about any more tax increases. We gave the president the 1%, the upper 1% of all taxpayers are going to have to pay more taxes. He wanted the upper 2%, but we compromised at 1%. In that process, we settled a lot of serious problems, so it wasn't all bad. But there still was a big spending component of that bill on the other side of the bill that Republicans detest. But I can tell you, you're right. We've got to face the music now, or we'll really face it later, and it will be maybe almost impossible to solve. And our goal is to help the poor, to help the senior citizens, to help those with disabilities, to help our people who depend on Medicare and depend on Medicaid. And I know you've got plenty of problems right here in the state with regard to what do you do with regard to what the president has suggested we have to do. I just know this. You folks will do what it takes to have our state be fiscally sound. And that's something I very deeply respect. So I respect each and every one of you, and I really appreciate the work you do.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to welcome Senator Hatch here, friend of ours, my husband and mine. Every day we come here and pledge allegiance to the flag here that represents our great country. And we hear so much negative coming from Washington. It's almost a downer. It's almost like you don't want to turn on TV anymore. I'm ready for some good news. Can you give me any examples where perhaps Republicans and Democrats are working together to accomplish something of good for the citizens of our country? I think we're all ready for something like that.
Well, it would take a long time, but let me just cite one illustration. The first bipartisan bill filed this year, at least to my knowledge, in the Senate, and I think really in the House too, was my I-squared bill. It was a Hatch, Klobuchar, Marco Rubio, Senator Coons bill, and we now have a whole raft of other co-sponsors from both sides to do something about our H-1B problem. And that is, we educate these folks here in America, we get them their master's degrees, their PhDs, and their particular skills, and then we push them out of the country. H-1B allows us to keep a number of those people and give them jobs in our country to help us here with their great knowledge and ability. Trouble with the H-1B program is it's satiated by the end of February. By the end of this month, every H-1B position will be taken. So we've come up with a bill that is called I-squared, bipartisan, that will use a market-based approach towards increasing the H-1B people. This should benefit Utah and every state that has the high-tech world in it. And all of our states do, but some, like Utah, are exceptional states. I just had a meeting last week with the CEO and chairman of the board of Apple. He had indicated that Apple wants to bring business back here to America, and that he wants to establish some plants in other states. I think they're getting a little tired of California with all the taxes there. I can't speak for him. I shouldn't indicate that he said that. He didn't. But I know they're getting tired of it. And so I deal with Silicon Valley down there all the time with every one of those CEOs, and I called him and said, why don't you stop in and see me? So he did. And I said, Utah's a perfect place for you to establish. I said, look at all of the IT firms that we have in Utah. They're doing very, very well. You have a great set of engineering schools in this state. And I went on and on and on. And he was listening. I don't know whether he'll do it, but the fact of the matter is that this I-squared bill is something that I think could lead us towards keeping our identity as the number one high-tech country in the world. And it's something we need to do. The problem is that the Republicans, and I think the Democrats, are going to try to both Democrats and Republicans and the Gang of Eight want to do a great big massive overhaul bill, and they need the H-1B bill to help them get that passed. The problem is I'm not sure they'll ever get that passed. And I think we should do this bill by bill. And if we would show people that we can pass an immigration bill like the I-squared bill, it would encourage everybody to maybe work a little bit more on solving our immigration problems. And there's a good desire on the part of both Democrats and Republicans to do that. The second thing I'd do in an individual bill, if I had my way, is I'd do a guest worker program, maybe similar to the Bracero program and some of the programs we've had in the past that really worked. I would do that, and hopefully with success in that, then we start going from there to a more comprehensive bill that would hopefully bring America together rather than split it apart. But that's just one illustration. I want you to know that there are a lot of Democrats come to me, and I go to them to see what we can do to resolve some of these terrible problems and to get us together and work together because, you know, both sides have good ideas. Both sides, if they get together, can do some really remarkable things, just like you find here. I mean, our state legislature, both the House and the Senate here, do marvelous, marvelous work. I'm not just trying to praise you. I mean, I know that. And I've watched it year after year after year. I have nothing but respect for what you do. And I wish we could get that same attitude back there and get enough people there who are willing to work together. There's a growing group of us who would like to bring us together, but we want to do it in the right way. If we don't do it in the right way, we'll never have a consensus. So I think step by step may be the way to do it. With regard to any number of other programs, we work every day with Democrats to try and make sure that we come together as much as we can. And there's a growing desire to do that. And then again, there's a growing desire to get us fiscally responsible, too. And in that regard, sometimes we split pretty badly. But I would just wish we could have the same attitude that you do here in Utah, that our folks here have in our state legislature. I have nothing but respect for you, for all of you. And I think most all of you know that. So just know that I feel honored to represent this state. I love the fact that you can bring Democrats and Republicans together here. I will do a better job of trying to do that back there. God bless all of you. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Mr. President.